first speaker is Jonathan Segal, Director at Wragge Co.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Hi everyone. So I'm John Segal, Director at Wragge Co, and I head up our FinTech desk. And today I'm going to talk about the legal implications of dealing in Bitcoin. I think it's a timely presentation given what's been going on with the Silk Road recently. So before we comment on what laws and regulations actually apply to Bitcoin, I think we need to define it. So what I'd normally do is go to the Oxford English Dictionary and try and find the definition. As you can imagine, it's not there yet. So let's start with Wiki. Good place to start. So how does Wikipedia define Bitcoin? This is just taken from the opening paragraph. Just going to summarize it. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency where the creation and transfer of Bitcoins is based on an open source cryptographic protocol that is independent of any central authority. Just skipping down a bit, the developer basically called it a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Okay, a couple of things there I've highlighted: cryptocurrency, peer-to-peer electronic cash system. But how would a layperson define Bitcoin? I'd probably say there's three things that a layperson would say. The first is money. And actually, we can look to a nice 19th century case of Hunter and Moss, which nicely defines money as that which passes freely from hand to hand throughout the community in final discharge of debts and full payment for commodities, being accepted equally without reference to the character or credit of the person who offers it. Okay, straw poll. Bitcoin, is it money? Not one. Oh, here we go. Okay, about half. Actually, that's what I thought. So, what else could it be? Currency? How's that defined? And this is actually in the Oxford English Dictionary. And this is the money or other commodity which is in circulation as a medium of exchange. Medium of exchange. You can use Bitcoins to buy things, right? Money, well, half of you think it is. Commodity, is it a currency? Hands up. Exactly the same people. No, and as it says there, a commodity, is it an asset? Or is it, which is again defined, an item of property or an effect so available. Could be an asset, right? Could be one. Could be all three. Could be a selection. So, as we know, Bitcoin's taken off internationally. So I want to take you on a quick trip around the world to see what different jurisdictions make of Bitcoin and how they define it. So let's start with the good old US of A, Bitcoin's biggest market. Some of you might be aware of the case, the Security Exchange Commission versus Trend & Shavers. So the Security Exchange Commission accused Trend & Shavers of running a Ponzi scheme through his hedge fund, BTC-ST. He promised a 3.9% return, accumulated 700,000 Bitcoins, and then he paid off his gambling debts and his rent. Not an ideal start. So obviously, the US government went in for him, and there's an initial case to work out whether the US courts had jurisdiction over him. He argued that he had learned how to win a game, okay, and that Bitcoins were not part of anything regulated by the United States. Red rag to a bull. This argument didn't go down very well in Texas. So the Judge Amos Mazant, the magistrate judge for the Eastern District of Texas, he stated, it's clear that Bitcoin can be used as money. Okay, so you get some bonus points for the voted. It can be used to purchase goods or services. It can also be exchanged for conventional currencies, such as the US dollar, euro, yen, and yuan. Therefore, Bitcoin is a currency or form of money. Okay, we've got the key things there: currency, form of money. Remember that for later. Basically, the reason for this judgment is to see whether the courts had jurisdiction. So I believe it's still going to civil and criminal proceedings. So now something that I'm pretty sure most of you will be aware of, especially if you read the Metro. So Ross William Ulbricht aka Dread Pirate Roberts. His website, The Silk Road, was set up using the Tor network to be completely anonymous, essentially creating a sort of secret eBay for which was used to distribute drugs, arms, and importantly, to launder millions of dollars. So payment on the Silk Road was in Bitcoin, which avoided the usual money laundering checks that would take place when normal online payments are made. So what interests lawyers in this case is that the prosecutors described Bitcoin as electronic currency designed to be as anonymous as cash. So we can see some themes developing here in the US. We've got currency, cash, money, electronic currency, things like that. So again, let's just remember that for a little bit later. Let's move a little closer to home, to the EU. So this is at EU level rather than individual member states. So a collapse in the exchange rate back in June 2011 basically prompted the ECB, the European Central Bank, to respond that they're monitoring the situation. 2 years later, they're still monitoring the situation. There's been no official rulings as far as we're aware on Bitcoin. Seeing as there's no official rulings, we need to consider whether Bitcoin is regulated by existing EU regulation. Okay, so let's think of some of the terms we've just seen in the US: electronic money, currency, electronic currency. So the first place to look, electronic money directive. This defines electronic money in particular as something with a stored monetary value and issued on receipt of funds. However, Bitcoins don't really fit that definition because they're not issued on receipt of funds, they're actually mined. Very simply, the miner solves complex mathematical problems with their computer. They're then issued with a Bitcoin. There's no central Bitcoin authority that you can go to exchange your cash for new Bitcoins. You can only purchase Bitcoins on the secondary market, either privately or through an exchange. So we don't think it's electronic money. We can look at some other legislation, the Payment Services Directive, and this talks about regulating payment services where there is a funds transfer. Now, funds means banknotes and coins, scriptural money, and electronic money. So Bitcoin, unless you get a physical representation, is not banknotes and coins. Scriptural money is something else. And electronic money actually links back to the Electronic Money Directive. So in that case, we don't think that it's caught by the Payment Services Directive. It's certainly unlikely to be. So let's look at the individual member states, starting off with Germany. And it's only when you look at Germany's approach that you realise the significance of all the definitions that we've just been looking at. They're not looking to shoot down Bitcoin like the Texas courts. They're thinking of tax revenue. The German Federal Ministry of Finance, or BaFin for short, defines Bitcoin as a unit of account and a private currency. So in the previous slide, we decided that Bitcoin's unlikely to be e-money, okay? And nor is it, according to German authorities, a legal tender. As they've said, it's a private currency. So putting that together, sending a Bitcoin, certainly in Germany, is not a transfer of money, but rather a transfer of goods or commodities. And that transfer of goods is potentially liable to VAT and to capital gains tax should a profit be made on the onward sale of those Bitcoins. So let's think back to the US definition, calling it electronic money or electronic currency. On that basis, assuming that those kind of tax laws are the same, it's unlikely to be taxable in that respect. It's a very interesting difference. It's also just worth mentioning that some German commentators have said recently that the definition as a private currency means that Bitcoin exchanges would presumably need a license from BaFin to actually operate. So the UK, probably of more relevance to most of you in this room. However, it's a little bit of a bare slide, unfortunately. 4th of September of this year, some Bitcoin experts met in Downing Street. which suggests to us that an FCA ruling is imminent, and perhaps some of the speakers later can talk more about this. But essentially, for me, this is a very short slide. As far as we're aware, there's no court rulings, no other regulation. So we're left with a pretty blank page in the UK. So, in stark contrast to the West, Thailand's headline-grabbing response has been an outright ban on Bitcoin, calling them illegal. However, when you delve into this a little bit deeper, it's not such a radical decision. The declaration actually came from Thailand's central bank, which is responsible for administering foreign exchange. However, the bank has no constitutional authority to actually ban anything. So really, what they're saying, and it's interesting to hear the Bank of Thailand's governor's quote, is they said, "For now we ask that they, the Bitcoin operators, not involve themselves with the baht, because what they do may be a way to speculate on the exchange rate. Hence, we ask for time to look at the issue first." So this suggests, I think, that the ban is only provisional. It's giving Thailand time to decide what they want to do, and if necessary, to legislate. So that's a quick scoot around the world just to see how different countries are thinking about regulating Bitcoin or kind of defining it. So here we're going to go to some practical examples. So what about setting up an exchange? Unfortunately, I'm going to give you the classic lawyerly answer here. It depends. It depends on where your main trading entity is actually incorporated and where the business is run from. It's this that will determine the laws and regulations that you're governed by. In the UK, unfortunately, due to the FCA uncertainty, it's actually very difficult to provide definitive legal advice to a Bitcoin exchange. However, we can look and comment on what we do not think will apply. So, as we've said before, Electronic Money Directive we don't think applies. Payment Services Directive we don't think applies. So what advice can we give? As lawyers, we can say, be prepared. Be prepared because Bitcoin operators should ensure that they're adhering to the best anti-money laundering procedures that they can put in place, so like robust anti-money laundering procedures. And also, some advice would be to be aware of the FCA's principles of business in case regulation does come along. And just to espouse some of these principles, a firm must conduct its business with integrity, with due skill, care and diligence, and the firm must take reasonable care to organise and control its affairs responsibly and effectively with adequate risk management systems. So there's some things to think about. But it's not just exchanges that will be of interest to people in the room. What about data centres? And advising some data centre clients who are basically hosting Bitcoin exchanges. What do they need to take into account of? What happens if the server is hosting Bitcoins and those Bitcoins are sent to Bangkok? There could be some potential issues there. And what data centers have been requiring is an ability to basically pull the Bitcoin exchange off the servers at a moment's notice. So that's something people should be aware of when negotiating contracts. And also, what about merchants accepting Bitcoins? Well, if we look at the German approach, there are some clear tax issues which people should be taking advice on. And as the market develops in Bitcoin and the regulators engage with the community, I hope to be able to provide more clarity on the issues in the not too distant future. So please watch this space. Thank you very much.
Can we take some questions?
Jonathan Levine, student at the University of Oxford. Just quickly, it is in the Oxford English Dictionary.
Is it?
Yeah. But my question is, does AML on Bitcoin, is it any different to AML in the traditional money sense? Are there cost savings? Has anyone looked into the AML process of how I would check who you are as a Bitcoin address or anything like that? Thanks.
I think I'm going to leave that to the to Mark actually later, who's setting up a Bitcoin exchange. So obviously, depending on how you're actually regulated and who regulates you, depends on what anti-money laundering requirements will be placed on you. So I mean, there is obviously general duties not to money launder, but other than that, you'd be looking at the FCA regulation there.
Do we have another question, Jonathan?
Do you think there's anything to worry about at all when you're dealing with an exchange which is just trading cryptocurrency for cryptocurrency? So if you're trading Bitcoins for Litecoins, but there's no fiat money involved whatsoever.
Okay. It depends. No, no. I think it's safe to say that I would have thought that the regulators who are looking at this are less interested in that kind of peer-to-peer exchange rather than kind of as you say, a fiat currency to cryptocurrency. But again, we can't actually say definitively whether those laws would change, because essentially in the US, as we saw, they're defining Bitcoin as money. So if they're defining Bitcoin as money, but Litecoin or some other coin differently, then I think you have the same issues there. Okay.
You've given examples of various spokespeople for various governments in Thailand, Germany, America, the EU, and Britain, but none of the spokesmen have spoken for the government. So is it true to say that there is no government authoritative regulatory guidance on Bitcoin from anywhere in the world at this point in time?
Yeah, on my research, that's what I found. It tends to be kind of it tends to be not coming from the parliaments, from the governments. It tends to be from the central banks or from certain regulatory authorities.
Individual ones. Yeah.
Individual ones, yeah.
Are there any legal issues around ownership of Bitcoins, given that what you actually hold isn't a Bitcoin, it's a private key?
In what sense are there any issues, as in...
I mean, you never actually hold a Bitcoin. It's impossible to. What you have is a private key which lets you spend a Bitcoin.
Yeah. It is actually a very interesting question, and one I've actually been thinking about, and actually, I'll be honest, haven't come to a kind of a legal conclusion on that, because you're right. What do you own? I think you have a right against something. I think it'd be fair to say it's from a legal sense, it's like a right in rem. So you have a right to something, but I couldn't really say any more than that.
Hi, Sean Jones, Coinsult. I wanted just to ask you a question about the jurisdictional issues. You made the point about it depends where you're incorporated and where your trading activity is. Is there also a risk that some jurisdictions seek to extend their powers beyond their own borders? I'm thinking perhaps of the US here.
Yes.
So that where your client is based might actually, or where your counterparty or who you're doing business with is based, may also determine the effect on your business, your Bitcoin business.
Yeah, I think absolutely. There are certain jurisdictions that will perhaps overreach outside their national borders, and I think you mentioned the obvious one there, and that's not to say that the other jurisdictions won't actually do the same. So again, I think it's really looking at all the laws and regulations in place at the moment, and really just determining from a practical perspective whether there is a risk that will happen.
Okay, we can take one more question.
I'm Stephen. HMRC provide a way for people that aren't regulated by another authority to register under the money laundering regulations. So surely if you've registered there and they accept your registration, the onus is then on them to tell you if something else needs to be done, and you should be free to do business, or not. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, if you're my personal view on it is, you should be doing the best you can proportionately to the size of your business and the risks involved in your business. So again, if you are going out there and saying yes, look, I am complying with this legislation or that type of legislation, I'm putting in place the correct procedures, then if the regulator does come knocking on your door and there's an issue, then you've got an audit trail and can say, yes, I've been doing X, Y, and Z essentially.
Sure, because I mean HMRC's website suggests that it's a registration and you don't need to be accepted, so once you've filled in the forms, then it's then up to them to come back to you, surely, and say that they need something else.
But I think, are you talking about AML for your exchange or for your customers?
Well, for any business that's not regulated by another authority, they say that you need to register as, I suppose it's a money services business, but for money laundering regulations, is all the website says. Yeah, but I think... I'm only going by what they say on the website.
No. Absolutely, but just from a practical perspective, so you might have some forms to fill out which will essentially say, you are who you are, but depending on the type of exchange or business, you will then have a duty essentially not to launder money, and not there are some common sense elements to there, and I think where you do have some kind of payment system or something where you are using money, I think those obligations are much higher.
Okay, Jonathan, thank you very much.
Thank you.